The Mandalorian is heading to Mandalore. In honor of what's sure to be a momentous season for this war-torn planet, today on the Nerd Strike Back, we're covering the history of Mandalore. Mandalore is located both within the Outer Rim territories and the New Territories, placing it in the northernmost region of the galaxy, within the Mandalore sector. It was once a lush planet filled with oceans, forests, grasslands, and jungles. Later, it would be torn to shreds and rendered inhospitable by countless wars. The planet is rendered mostly desert, with domed cities dotting the surface. In its ancient days, Mandalore was home to the Mythosaur, the skull of which would become the primary emblem for Mandalorians. Other extinct wildlife included the Great Jaigalar, or Shriekhawk, a massive bird of prey, which served as the emblem for the Vizsla clan, as well as the Death Watch. The temperate climate, the majority of the wildlife, and the very surface of Mandalore would be laid to waste during what is known as the Mandalorian cataclysm. Supposedly, this was the final battle of the Great Mandalorian Jedi War, which some of you may likely be familiar with through what is now Legends, although it's not yet been totally contradicted. In Legends, the Mandalorians were led by the likes of Mandalore the Ultimate and Cassus Fett. They would fight against the Republic's best, which included Revan and Malak, a famous Jedi duo featured in the Knights of the Old Republic, both of whom would take the title Darth after their eventual turn to the dark side. However, since the Mandalorian Jedi War has not yet received a deep dive within canon, we can speculate that perhaps the broader details from the older sources are valid. Either way, the end of this great war renders Mandalore a wasteland. Bouncing back to the ancient history as it pertains to canon, at some point prior to the great conflict with the Jedi, a Mandalorian by the name of Tar Vizsla joined the Order. He is the only Mandalorian to ever do so. During this time, he also serves as Mandalore, the title of their people's sole leader. It would be his lightsaber that would signify the right to rule all of Mandalore. After Tar Vizsla's death, the black-bladed lightsaber initially remained in the possession of the Jedi, within their temple on Coruscant. But during the fall of the Old Republic, Mandalorian commandos of House Vizsla seized the darksaber, allowing it to be passed down until its first reappearance in the possession of Pre-Vizsla during the Clone Wars era. The Mandalorians themselves are divided into multiple houses or clans, and you may recognize some of their names. Fett, which of course we are well familiar with. Saxon, a name you may recognize from Gar Saxon, an antagonist in Rebels and the Clone Wars, who serves as Maul's primary enforcer during his regime. Ren, of course being the notable Sabine Wren from Rebels, as well as her mother Ursa Wren. Kryze, Satine and her sister bo-katan, who we've most recently seen in The Mandalorian, as well as Corky, wherever he is, and the list goes on and on. Any last name is often tied to a house or clan. This was one of the traditions that, despite individual disagreements, all would find this custom vital to the core of Mandalorian society and culture. Throughout Mandalorian history, we have seen infighting amongst clans, as pride was a chief trait of the Mandalorians, natural born or not. The old ways of Mandalore, as seen during the time of the Old Republic, emphasized honor as well as clan loyalty. However, after the aforementioned Mandalorian cataclysm, where the planet is made largely inhabitable, Mandalore would still break into further conflicts. This would result in even more loss for the planet, including the loss of any vegetation that had previously survived. Mandalorians have a disposition toward weakening themselves internally, to the point where an entity like the Empire could arrive and decimate them with ease. Now that we've touched on Mandalore's culture and society, let's take a look at Mandalore's chaotic but rich history. We've covered that Tar Vizsla was the first Mandalorian Jedi, sometime before the Mandalorian Jedi War, which, in combination with other conflicts, laid waste to Mandalore. Fast forwarding now just prior to the events in The Phantom Menace, civil war sparks once again on Mandalore between the more pacifist New Mandalorians and the martial traditionalists, later known as the Death Watch. The The Jedi dispatch Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan Kenobi to Mandalore for a year. They are tasked with defending the Duchess Satine Kryze, leader of the new Mandalorians and ruler of the planet. The nature of this civil war provided the trio with little rest, and they never stayed in one place too long. Among the combatants in this war, as confirmed by Boba Fett in Season 2 of The Mandalorian, was his father, Jango Fett. While we don't know for certain, it's been speculated that he fought on the side of the warrior clans. This civil war would result in the vast majority of Mandalore's population being wiped out. It also saw the banishing of Mandalore's warrior clans to the moon of Mandalore, known as Concordia. You'll recall this moon being the primary base of operations for the Death Watch, when we meet them in the Clone Wars. This would usher in a pacifist era on Mandalore, led by the new Mandalorians. While Vizsla and Death Watch believe their ideals followed most closely with the Mandalore tradition of leadership, the new Mandalorians opted for pacifism, as Mandalore was in desperate need of rebuilding. Thus, the new Mandalorians had their way, as we see Satine ruling Mandalore in a much more diplomatic manner in the Clone Wars. Satine has the capital of Keldabi rebuilt without the help of the Republic, although the capital would later change to Sundari, which we saw under Maul's rule in the last season of the Clone Wars. Most recently, we saw the ruins of Sundari in the Mandalorian Season 3 trailer. Satine oversees the construction of multiple cities built in similar fashion, great biocubes that were insulated to provide habitable conditions for Mandalore citizens. At the outset of the Clone Wars, Duchess Satine declares neutrality, siding neither with the Republic nor the CIS. Unknown to the new Mandalorians, however, Death Watch is in full operation on Concordia. Pre-Vizsla enlists separatist help in order to disrupt operations on Mandalore, in an effort to take over and restore Mandalore to its warrior roots. Surviving several assassination attempts, the Duchess would plead her case to the Senate on Coruscant. Even though Mandalore remains neutral, her life is still in danger. However, she would come under fire even within the Republic's capital, yet she remains protected by Kenobi and Anakin Skywalker. Despite her suspicions that the attempts on her life were not only made by Death Watch, but also the CIS, Satine would advocate for neutrality. While Mandalore continues to avoid the Clone Wars for the most part without ties to a major power, the economy on the planet begins to suffer. It's during this time that Prime Minister Almec sows further seeds of corruption by opening up a black market, smuggling a variety of goods, most importantly the chemical slabin. Slabin, while not usually toxic, was deadly in improper concentration. The smugglers that Almec dealt with imported tea diluted with slabin into Sundari. This causes great sickness among Mandalore's citizens, particularly within the children. However, this plot was eventually foiled with the help of Satine and Senator Padme Amidala. Almec, however, was able to avoid any accusations. Instead, he blames Death Watch and offers to continue investigating the matter. Later, Almec would be exposed for illegally moving food and supplies through his black market schemes, thus landing him in prison. As the Clone Wars rage on, Death Watch orchestrates another attempt to usurp the rule of Mandalore from the new Mandalorians. This time, however, they would be allied with Maul and the Shadow Collective. The crime families and Maul's apprentice, Savage Opress, cause mass hysteria and casualties throughout Sundari. Using these attacks, Vizsla and Death Watch step in to appear as saviors, allegedly halting the attacks. Satine is secretly placed in prison as chaos begins to unfold. Maul and Vizsla soon discover that they had many disagreements, and given both their natures, this isn't surprising. Maul is eventually imprisoned with Savage, where they meet Almec. Maul convinces Almec to act as a faux ruler of the planet once he escapes from prison, and Almec agrees. Maul would indeed escape, entering the throne room and challenging Vizsla to single combat. Vizsla would duel Maul with the darksaber, but loses the battle. Thus, Maul becomes the new Mandalore, to the dismay of Vizsla's men. Maul quickly appoints Almec as the ruler and pushes the story that Satine had overthrown Vizsla, and that her last act had been to appoint Almec as Prime Minister once more. A portion of Death Watch would go AWOL, led by bo-katan Kryze. They rebel against Maul and Almec, stirring up another internal conflict on Mandalore. She enlists the helps of Corky to rescue Satine and contact the Republic for aid. The long fight for neutrality was quickly coming to an end. Briefly escaping Maul's forces, Satine sends a message to the Jedi Temple. Due to their official neutrality, only Obi-Wan answers the call, no doubt influenced by his love for the Duchess. After infiltrating Maul's men by donning commando armor, Kenobi is able to briefly free Satine again. However, the two are captured and brought directly to Maul. Maul executes Satine in front of Kenobi, taking yet another loved one from the Jedi. Kenobi would be imprisoned, but is soon rescued by bo-katan and her forces. Sundari is engulfed in civil war, but in the chaos, Kenobi escapes. Maul would not be allowed much satisfaction, however. Soon, Darth Sidious arrives, dispatching Savage Opress and Maul's men. He captures Maul, but not before showing him the consequences of disrupting his grand plan. Sidious then imprisons Maul on Stygion Prime, within the Spire. Almec instructs Gar Saxon and Rook Kast, along with Maul's horn-helmed super commandos, to free the Sith. With Sidious anticipating this move, Dooku is captured and taken prisoner by the group as they escape with Maul. General Grievous follows the group to Dathomir, where he kills Maul's mother, Mother Talzin. Maul had attempted to sway Dooku to his cause, by force or otherwise, but now his plan lay in ruin once more. Maul and his remaining forces would eventually flee back to Mandalore, casting a shadow over Almec's rule. During the events of the Revenge of the Sith, the Republic dispatches the 501st Legion, led by Captain Rex and Ahsoka Tano, to aid bo-katan in the siege of Mandalore. This would be the first and only battle in which the 332nd Division would appear, a splinter of the 501st, which bore a distinct nod to Ahsoka's Togruta traits. The Republic troops, along with bo-katan's Mandalorians, would overrun Maul's forces. This culminates in a duel between Ahsoka and Maul, which, side note, is one of my personal favorite lightsaber duels we've ever gotten. Maul is bested by Ahsoka and captured by the Republic. Now the planet is under the control of the Galactic Republic, who may have given it back to bo-katan and her followers. However, the Galactic Republic would soon become the Galactic Empire, dashing any hopes bo-katan had for rule. The Saxon clan, refusing to stay down after Maul's defeat, sides with the Empire and would help force bo-katan out of power. The Empire appoints Gar Saxon as the governor of Mandalore. Saxon would later be defeated by Ursa Wren, Sabine's mother, during an insurrection. He is then replaced by his brother, Tiber Saxon. This incites a civil war between the Saxon and Wren clans, as we see in Rebels. Bo-katan and Clan Kryze, along with the clans Rook and Eldar, also join the fight. The war comes to Sundari, with the help of Sabine and her crew. They would score a Pyrrhic victory against Saxon's forces and retreat back to bo-katan's camp. After more disruptions against Tiber Saxon and the Empire, Clan Wren and the other clans would formally rally under bo-katan as their leader. Sabine presents bo-katan with the darksaber, which she had earlier recovered from Dathomir. This, of course, sealed her rule as leader of Mandalore for the time. Sometime later, the Empire grows tired of Mandalore and its uncontrollable people. They initiate the Great Purge, glassing the planet and driving the Mandalorian people into near extinction. We saw glimpses of the Night of 1,000 Tears in the Book of Boba Fett. We know that during this conflict, the darksaber is acquired by the Empire, specifically by Moff Gideon. The already decimated planet's surface is now nothing more than ruins, and essentially a mass tomb. This leads us into The Mandalorian Season 3. Din Djarin and Grogu are both Mandalorian foundlings, which, as we know from our Complete Travels of Jango Fett video, are non-native Mandalorians who are found and taken in by Mandalorians. Foundlings are inducted into the customs and culture and granted their own armor as well. No doubt Grogu and Mando will explore what we can presume to be the ruins of Sundari. Din, who is in possession of the darksaber, will likely give us a window into much of the history discussed here. We know we'll see the mythical fountains that lie in the mines of Mandalore. But what else will he discover there? Relics from the Clone Wars and the Old Republic? More clues concerning the Great Purge? Only time will tell. We have seen from the trailers many different Mandalorians appearing, likely representatives of the clans mentioned here. Perhaps this season will give us a proper conclusion to the history of Mandalore. If you want to support the channel, visit our Patreon page, where you can also unlock exclusive perks. And let us know in the comments what characters and topics you'd like to see us cover on the Nerd Strike Back.